Good morning, Mr. Wynter.
Good morning, Mr. Henley, but you can call me Barnaby, Martin.
I will be calling you Barnaby for the rest of this conversation. There's no worries about that. But what I say is I like to start formally, and then, we'll see how far into the gutter we actually end up. That's the way it starts.
Okay, start high.
We'll start high because we've got no idea how low we could go. Thank you so much, man, for agreeing to spend this time with me. We are speaking on the recommendation of Robert Craven. So if this is appalling, it will absolutely 100% be his
It's
fault.
all Robert's fault, whatever happens, unless it's good, and then he wasn't involved in any shape or form, to be fair. So.
Exactly, yes. Let's go with that. That's fantastic. So we trust Robert, so we are here speaking. I had a fantastic conversation with Robert just about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I'm talking about marketing. So as you know, this is kind of conversational. There are only 4 questions. The questions are, how are you qualified to talk to us about marketing? What is it that you do for your clients? How do they find you? How do you feel about marketing? And what is your recommendation right now in this situation that we find ourselves in? But that will keep us busy for about an hour and 15 minutes, if you're cool with that.
I'm cool with that.
Fantastic. So shall we start at the beginning? I don't know you, so this is going to be an interesting conversation. I have Googled you, so I know that the one thing I know about you is that in 1999 you were the youngest MD of a top 200 marketing agency in the UK or something, and that's all I know about you. So let's just start at the beginning, and you can tell us all how you are qualified to talk to us about marketing.
Okay, so it's always easy to talk about yourself. So I started with a psychology degree at Dundee University with the sole intention of becoming an educational psychologist. Realised halfway through I wasn't going to become one of those because it wasn't my style, and settled on advertising as a career. So left university, missed the deadline for applying for a postgraduate course. So went and rode around Australia on a motorcycle for a year, came back and did a postgraduate diploma in advertising and also one in marketing at the same time. From that, shot straight into the advertising industry, worked for nothing for an agency called Lonsdale's in Portman Square on primarily the Abbey National account. And after that 3-month period came to an end, I joined a small agency in Farringdon to launch a thing called the Fiat Ducato, the Fiat Fiorino. I worked on Saab Scania trucks, RJ Hall car leasing and Weber carburetors. Took on my first mentor after about 8 months in industry and sat down with him and said, what do I do? And he said, well, if you are going to pursue a career in advertising, automotive is a great place to be. It's the second largest purchase anybody ever makes. You'll always have a career in that. And I said, oh, that sounds really interesting. He says, you've got a CV to die for that going forward. And I said, oh, that's really cool. I said, what other alternatives are there? And he said, well, the other thing you can do is you can become what's called a specialist generalist now. He said, in other words, you work across lots of different clients, learn how business works, and then maybe later on in your career you can be more advisory on a business sense. So I said, well, that sounds really good as well. I said, which one should I do? And he said, am I right in saying that you ride a Vespa scooter and you've got a Beetle Cabriolet? And I said, yes, and I have both still today. And he said, you're not a motorhead. So do not go down the automotive route because you won't like Formula One racing and talking about Lamborghinis and Ferraris and whatever for the rest of your life. I said, oh, okay, fair enough. So from there, I spent 18 months at that agency and then got a move to Ogilvy and Mather, which was one of the world's largest agencies at the time, to work solely on Ford. And I relaunched the Ford Sierra and I launched the Ford Granada and did a whole Ford campaign there. And I worked on Ford for about 4 years. But within 6 months, I started to hector the management to say, can I work on something else? And they said, no, you only work on Ford at Ogilvy. That's all you do. It's a £60 million account in our 180 million turnover office here in London. You only work on that. I said, okay. So I just kept hectoring every morning for 6 months until eventually I got the chance to work on a pitch for a thing called Argos, which was a magazine catalogue retailer in the UK, and they had just exited from BAT Industries and they were looking to relaunch. Anyway, so I got to work on the pitch for that, and we won the account, which was really exciting, and everyone was really pleased, and I went back to Ford. And then John Mayhead, who was the then marketing director of Argos, said one of the conditions of Ogilvy being awarded the account is everybody who worked on the pitch worked on his account, and of course I was on that overhead slide, which will probably mean nothing to any of the younger audience, but was the precursor to PowerPoint, using plastic sheets and a large light bulb. And so I got to work on Argos, and then over that period, so over an 18-month period, I got moved off Ford, and I ended up launching Bird's Eye Health Options, Bird's Eye Steakhouse, Radion washing detergent, and before I left Ogilvy after 6 years, I'd launched a thing called Lipton Iced Tea worldwide. So completely moved away from Ford, away from automotive, and that then kicked off the whole generous thing. Ogilvy moved from the centre of London to Canary Wharf, which is a big commercial area in London, miles away from the centre of London, miles away from the action, and at the time it was in phase one build with only 20% occupation, so I really didn't like it there. So I moved back to Soho to launch Boots Opticians, Eurostar, which was the train from London to Paris. I launched Red Stripe Lager, and started to build a whole understanding of how the internet worked, all that sort of thing. So we're talking about the early 90s. Got then changed agencies again after 3 years because they got bought by Grey, and I really liked the small agency environment, so I went to another small agency, a startup, to work with one of the most famous creative people in London at the time, a chap called Dave Trott, and he just started a new agency called Walsh Trott Chick Smith, and there I launched Toshiba Home Cinema, and worked on the Sun Express and a thing called First Telecom, which was the first alternative to BT. And from there, I then got headhunted to become the youngest MD in 1999. So that's really, within really eight or 9 years of me starting my career in advertising, I then became the youngest MD of what was then seen as the first fully integrated marketing agency. So this agency did everything from designing your logo and your reception area right through to your television and your online presence, using a thing called the brand bucket and a 6-step engagement model. So I was persuaded to join them, and there I launched some major brands like E-Trade, became the world's largest online broker, Book and Technology became the world's largest optical components company, rebranded Children's Society, Marie Curie Cancer Care, big charities. And then I bought that company in 2001. Just prior to September the 11th, and then spent 10 years really addressing the massive changes that were going on in the marketing industry, the move from reliance on offline to online, through a whole period of change in the way marketing worked, the way marketing strategy works, until in 2010, or actually in 2009, I moved I moved my business from a PAYE employment organisation with 35 staff to, by 2008, I had 35 freelancers and only 2 staff. So as people left or retired or changed jobs, we replaced them with freelancers. So I had a whacking great building in central London, 6 floors with studios and meeting rooms, and all these freelancers coming and going, working a model that we developed over 7 years. And as part of that, I became a professional speaker in 2008, and I'm on a platform in 2009, and being billed as a behavioural marketer, and I'm alongside a behavioural economist, and he says there's going to be a double-dip recession. I really didn't have the energy to go through a third, what would have been effectively a third recession in my career, and so I moved to an outsource model, spent a year taking the system and process and pushing it into the cloud, and in 2010 I pushed out on my own. So today I now effectively represent a full service agency. I have possibly somewhere in the region of over 120 odd people working on my client businesses. They all work for other companies, so I contract to other companies, and today I work with 5 corporates a year, fundamentally changing their whole organisation so it becomes marketing led. I mentor business leaders. I'm mentoring 21 business leaders at the moment. I've written my first book. I've just finished my second book. And I speak maybe 35 times a year, and I'm also a NED, non-exec director, on 3 businesses as well. So I have this eclectic portfolio, all focused on really fundamentally changing a whole business so it becomes marketing led, and that's really where I'm at today, and absolutely loving it, to be honest, Martin. Absolutely loving it.
Fantastic. I'm a little bit embarrassed now that I asked you how you're qualified to talk to us about marketing.
It's all right. It's all right. You didn't know anything about me, so that's absolutely fine. I'm
okay. And now we know quite a lot about you, like a huge amount about you. Okay, so it's interesting. where this kind of interests me, at least, is the first thing is that your experience is hugely different from mine. Nobody has ever let me near anything like a brand, let alone the household brands that you've been describing now. So I can't imagine what a disaster that might be if somebody gave me that kind of like a £60 million account for Ford. I can't imagine what would happen. And the second thing is this thing about marketing led. So these two things are really interesting to me because it never occurred to me until very recently. I was doing one of these chats and somebody explained to me that there's clearly two types of marketing. There's the marketing that you do if you're a startup or a small business where you might be looking for your very first client. And then there's like brand type marketing where it's all about keeping the machinery happening and being more efficient and more effective. So that interests me enormously. And the thing about marketing led is that my mantra is that being in business is effectively, and I've taken this from Robert, and we spoke about this at length, but it's effectively about finding, winning, and keeping customers profitably. So there is nothing in business that isn't sales or marketing. So the idea that businesses might think that they are anything other than marketing-led frazzles my mind. It absolutely frazzles my mind. So I don't know which direction we go in first. Do we go in the brand direction? Because I've also read that you've been responsible for hundreds of brands. Is that?
Yeah,
Let's talk about the brands thing.
Over 540, that's right. Yeah. So I bought over 540. Well, 557 is the number I quote. Over 557 brands to market. Yeah. Yeah.
To market. So this is launching brands.
So well, to be fair, all it doesn't, the household names you talk about were launches.
Yes.
The fact that they're now household names is because the launch was successful. So it's always an interesting one. I when I wrote my book, it's got a load of logos on the front, and somebody said, "Really good book, but the trouble is, it's all about famous brands." And I had to respond and say, "Yeah, I think you might have missed the point. Those brands didn't exist before we got involved." So
right.
The fact that they're household is proof that the system works. So it was, yeah. I mean, effectively, any time you introduce a new idea in the form of a brand to the market, that's a launch, isn't it? It doesn't matter. It might be from an existing company like a Unilever or a Ford or whatever, but effectively the brand itself is a new presence in the market. So I would consider them all to be launches. So whenever I talk about bringing them to market, effectively that they're all launches in that sense.
Okay. All right, so that's interesting. Now, in the conversation that we had setting this conversation up, you were saying that it's all about brand, that you have to be brand in 2021. What is that about?
Okay, so I think I always find the question fascinating. It's because people have yet to define what a brand is and its difference from branding. So let me just first of all clarify that for you. Because most people muddle up brand with branding. So branding is simply where you create a look, a feel, a logo, a representation of a product or a service, and you put that into the market. That's branding. Actually, that's got very little to do with brand. So branding. So we asked ourselves this question back in 1999 because I was presented with the brand bucket, and I went to my first board meeting. And I said, okay, I kind of get what a bucket is. What's a brand? And we had that day 148 person years experience in the room of producing brands, thousands, over 4,000 in fact. And we filled out 7 sheets of A1 paper off a flip chart on what we thought a brand was. And when I've asked almost every audience, every workshop, I asked this question front up. And people always say it's the logo, look and feel, it's quality, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's a perception in the consumer's mind. It's all these. It's quality. It's all those sorts of things. And that's absolutely not what a brand is. So we spent 3.5 months coming up with the following definition of brand, and hopefully this will help answer the question. So we define brand as every experience that affects the relationship between a product or service and its buyer. So the key thing about brand today is, first of all, the perception of brand can only exist with somebody who has bought from you. Anything else up to the point of purchase is merely opinion, because it is the exchange of either time or money, and money is really a reflection of time. it is that at that point when people really have a clear perception of what the value is that you're providing. But the key thing about a brand today is it's a relationship. It's a relationship that people value more than the relationship they have with their money. And so therefore, the role of marketing is to create every single experience in your business so that it portrays a relationship that at every time feels like it's worth more than the money in people's pockets. Now, if you do that, people will give you the money in their pocket in exchange for the relationship they're buying with you. Now, that relationship can come in the form of a physical item like a product, or it will come in the form of a service, which is something that provides you, different benefits in a different way. So for me, brand is about building relationships between your product or service and the buyer. Marketing is the discipline of driving everything in your business to build those relationships. And business itself is simply a set of commercialized relationships, because what you're doing is you're selling the product you've produced, or you're selling the service that you provide in exchange for money in the form of a relationship. So for me, brand is a relationship. And now when you start to think about that, I think Robert's approach, which is that create, nurture and everything, is a little too one-dimensional for me. Because what I want to be doing is I want to be sitting with the guys in the warehouse. I want to be sitting with the guys in product development. I want to sitting with the people who answer the phones and communicate with people who are buying from them. I want to be sitting with the people who produce the communication that stems from the organisation. And all of those people have to be part of the value story that they're telling, because that's what people are buying a relationship with. The outcome, the output. So it's a bit one-dimensional to talk about it as a mechanic for generating leads, looking after the leads and converting the leads, etc., etc. That's to me far too one-dimensional, which is why, in the end, you're right, absolutely right, Martin, about that business today is all about marketing. As long as you define marketing, it's the mechanic by which you commercialize relationships with whatever it is you have chosen to sell.
Wow. Okay. Good. Interesting. I'm just thinking, because I've been on a bit of a journey with this idea of brand. Because the way I started is I started as a salesperson, and for 10 years I was a salesperson. And I was one of those hunter-gatherer type salespeople. I always found myself in businesses that didn't invest a second or a penny in marketing. So it was left to us, the salespeople, to go out and canvas and find the customers and do the work. So that's kind of where I came from. So at that point, I had no respect for brand whatsoever, because the brand wasn't supporting me, it wasn't helping me. So in as much as I believed in brand, it was about the brand that I was developing, the relationship I was developing with my customers, and it didn't matter what I was selling. Then what happened is I started the Effective Marketing Company, because I was of the impression that I'd been in the sales teams with none of the budget and all of the target, watching the marketing people lord it up with all of the budget and none of the target. So I was going to help myself to some budget. That was the idea. What I ended up doing is kind of counseling people, like, if I was a proactive salesperson in your business, this is what I would be doing. So that was there. Then digital marketing came along, and it got very exciting, and also not very much about brand, because you can be in the right place at the right time with the right message, and you don't have to have this huge relationship, So that's not very much about brand. And then in 2013, I started lecturing for the Digital Marketing Institute, and there was this whole thing about display advertising, the whole module, like a half day about display advertising. So now I had to start believing in it, because I had to teach this thing. Like, why would you invest a penny in brand awareness, in building those associations, those relationships, those whatever those things are, if you can just buy a sale through PPC? Or do you see what I'm saying? So yeah. So actually, it's not been a roller coaster. It was like a long uphill, and then quite a short downhill. Well, okay, now I get brand, and I've had to get it so I can teach it. That's the thing. On another one of these chats, I spoke to some Rick Atsapati in Malta, and he is much more of a brand. What's the word? A brand cheerleader. Advocate, there we go, thank you. So he says that he sees the role of marketing as fighting the decline in value from commoditization. And that screams to me the value of brand. I'm kind of on a bit of a rant.
My challenge with this is, which is great, but then, I guess my question to that is, has that person ever launched a brand, created a brand, put a brand into market? Because if they had, they couldn't use that definition. It just wouldn't be possible because it's way too transactional. And the moment you start, whenever I hear create, nurture, this, commodity, whatever, I just realise these people are all way too transactional in the way they think about it. Brand is an ongoing blend of emotional and rational from beginning to end. And unless you genuinely understand that, you have no concept of what a brand is, because we're buying a relationship in such a way as it's going to enhance our quality of life. It fits with what we're about, and there is a very particular journey that people go through on that. And so when I hear these definitions, I think, yeah, I can see how that would work for you, but it isn't a brand. That's not what a brand is. A brand is, for me, brands are like people. They're just the glue that sticks us all together, so that we can all live our lives in a similar sort of pattern and shape, but demonstrate individualism. They're much more meaningful than a transactional thing, because I think people are still trapped by the idea that marketing is a tool, or brand is a tool to generate sales, and it absolutely isn't anymore. It is absolutely the raison d'etre for all business ideas. It's this sense of belonging in the environment. It's a thing, a real thing. At the end of the day, if that when Ogilvy got sold to WPP, and they part of the selling price, £60 million, was for the brand, right? Well, I'm sorry, that's not about an uplift of commodity or whatever it was, the definition of the thing. It's just nonsense. If the brand was something that existed in the consumer's mind, it would never be an asset of a business. Brand has always been seen an asset of the business. And when you sell a business, one of the most valuable assets you can have is your brand. So when I hear people put these kinds of transactional definitions on them, I just go, okay, I'm sure it works for you. I'm sure you've got a great life and a great business. That's great. But that is absolutely not what brand is. Because you can't place your definition as an asset on a balance sheet. It's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And actually, I learned this from Guinness. Very funny. So I was at Ogilvy, and I was working in the Unilever account team, and we were right next to the Guinness account team. And I used to get in very early. I was one of the earliest people to arrive in the office, and the chairman ran out of his office, Mike Walsh, and said, he said, "Where are all the Guinness?" He just walked up to me. He said, "Where are all the Guinness team?" I said, "I don't know. I think there's a big shoot going on. They're shooting the next Guinness commercial, so I think they're all out of that." And he said, "Oh, Mike." He said, "Guinness are holding a conference at Centre Point Tower in the centre of London, and we need a representative. What are you doing today?" And I wasn't smart enough to go, "Well, actually, I've got my real job." He said, "Okay." And I paused for long enough to say, "Right, you are going and representing Ogilvy and Mather at this Guinness conference." I didn't work on Guinness, didn't know anything about Guinness. Anyway, so I went in, introduced myself, and I said, "Oh, great to have the agency here." The session was a session for agencies, right, about the Guinness, the way Guinness approached the market. So it was all really interesting. There were like 300 agencies there, and there was me, the representative of the current agency who had the Guinness account. So how nerve-wracking. So I'm sat in the front, blah, blah, they keep referring to me. Look, we break for lunch, and we come back, and the session after lunch is the head of finance of Guinness. Okay, there's a purpose to this story, so bear with. And I come back because I'm part of the agency, and there's maybe 60 people in the room of the 360 people, because they've all looked at the agenda and they've all gone for lunch and they've all gone, actually, we don't really listen to the FD. And he said, he stood up and he said, first of all, great to see Barnaby here, very fine, you're embarrassed. He said, and not surprised to see so few of you have come back. We at Guinness believe this is the most important session, the immediate session after lunch for you as agencies, to understand how we as clients work. He said, so he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the balance sheet and the P&L, right? And you could visibly see all the 60 who come back and went, oh, like this. And I'm thinking, right, this is going to be interesting. And so he went through it and he literally went, okay, this is how it works, raw materials, bottling, licensing, blah, blah, blah. He said, and then there's other, he said. And as you can see in other, there's a budget of 20 million. He said, that's you guys. He said, because you, as agencies, don't have a place on our balance sheet or P&L. He said, so let me just go through it again. Here's the scenario. I get a phone call and I say, we need to cut 5 million from your budget, from the accounts this year. So he says, I go through it and he says, so should I cut bottling? No. Should I cut raw materials? No. Should I cut distribution? No. Should I cut licensing? Well, what's this big figure under other? 20 million. I'll change that to 15. Nobody will notice. He said, that's when you guys get the phone call to say our budget's been cut. Now, anybody who's worked in the marketing industry will know that there are regular calls from clients saying we've cut our budgets, because naive accounts, and what their position was very clear on this. He said what a naive financial directors do is they think that cutting the marketing budget has no impact on the business, and they keep everything else going. He said. And he went through that, and then he said, did it again. And by the time he'd finished, there was like 3 million left in the other thing, which was our budget, having started with 20. Now, we as big agencies knew that we would get given budgets on January the 1st of 20, and by the end of the year, we would be lucky if we got 5 out of it, And he said, so at Guinness, we fundamentally ring fence the money that goes into building the brand, building the relationships, and making sure, he said, because we know that if people don't come buy our product, it doesn't matter how good our bottling is, or our raw materials are in the warehouse, or our licensing model, if there's no one there to buy the product, there is no business, because that's the machine. And I took that as a massive lesson right way back when, and thought, that's fascinating. My job is to convince my clients that the sacrosanct nature of the budget that is allocated to marketing, because that is the very essence and the fundamental of being in business, which is effectively producing a great product, producing a great service, and forming relationships with that at a commercial level with the outside world. If you don't get that, you don't get brand, you don't get marketing. You can throw at me all your transactional commodity nurture things until you're blue in the face. The reality is you don't have a business unless you are marketing led.
Good. I'm with you. Now, this is interesting because this nurture thing that you're talking about isn't the conversation that Robert and I had. The conversation we had was about this. If you're in marketing, you're effectively in the business of buying customers. That's what you're doing. And so at that point, then marketing becomes as quantifiable as anything else they're buying, bottling, production, all of those things. And the most naive accounts director can see, actually, if you put in front of them, you're paying this much for your customer and you're getting this much value from your customer, and this is the value that we are bringing, and our mission is to drive the customer value up whilst the cost of customer acquisition goes down. That then is something an accountant can understand. I think it's a failing of marketing that they don't talk about that. They don't present it in that way.
Yeah, and I so in the transactional conversation, I agree with you 100%. Yeah,
right.
But in the world of brand, I don't agree with you at all. That you don't buy anybody. I think that I find that kind of idea sort of abhorrent. That kind of ideology. And actually, what's changed in my 35 years, it has always been my belief that in the early days of advertising, when advertising dominated the marketing mix, and it absolutely doesn't anymore, we were effectively putting out invites to have a relationship with us. It happened to come in the form of television or press or radio or perhaps cinema as well in the early days. Clearly the onset of the online arena, but actually that level of marketing is a shop window. It's an invite to buy. It's not, you're always inviting people in. And what's changed in marketing strategy today, it's a fundamental shift. It's shifted over the last 20 years, is where you need your marketing to be working is to mop up all the people who are already heading your way. Because what's happened with the knowledge economy and the digital economy is the buyers are far more astute, sophisticated and equipped when they come to buy. So where I started, maybe you did as well, Martin, when you were in sales, where I started, there was this idea that you were solving a problem that often people didn't even know they had. So actually what we would do is we would foist problems on the marketplace. People go, yeah, I've got that problem. I hadn't thought about it, but I've got that problem. And then they would come and buy you as a solution. So that characterized certainly the first 15 years of my career. We saw that change as we were doing our research in the mid-90s as a result of the internet, because what people did is they'd wake up and they go, I kind of got a bit of a problem. And then they'd start to go online and look and go, etc. Now what happens, and 88% of all buying decisions start online, according to the e-commerce foundation and Mary Meeker, and that's certainly amongst the younger generation, and that seems to be reflected in everything I see in the older generation, and it's also true of B2B and B2C. So 88% buying decisions start online. So what happens is people wake up in the morning with a problem and then they Google it. And then you go, oh, and then they realise that other people have their same problem, but other people are also offering up solutions. So very quickly, they get a little shopping list of that could be a solution, that could be a solution, that could be a solution. And by the time they contact you, according to CEB in America, by the time people contact you for the very first time, they're more likely to buy from you than not buy from you. So you're not buying anybody. What you're doing is you're providing a pathway to your product or your service, and that's how you should be using the engagement strategy with the marketplace. There's none of this blasting out and buying people, and it's all way too transactional. It's much more people are out there, they've identified their problem, they've qualified their problem, they've identified you as a solution, and now what they're doing is they're heading towards you. And what you've got to do is you've got to literally, as they reach you, hold out your hand, take their hand, and lead them into your way of solving the problem they've already identified, and just say, this is the way we do it. So you've got to make it easy. So the perception of value is much more about service. It's much more about ease of buying than at ever time before. And actually the products itself, actually the price in many cases is irrelevant. Otherwise you wouldn't see, Deliveroo delivering your Burger King, right? You're paying more for a Burger King. It's going to be lukewarm when it arrives, yeah, rather than fresh from the griddle. But people will pay more for that, or any food. Or if you go on to an Expedia or onto Amazon, the product itself might be a bit cheaper, but you've got to pay transportation. So you end up paying more for the product than you would if you went and bought it from a shop. But no hassle, no parking, no getting into town, no bumping and rubbing up against other people when you don't want to. Actually, it's all done around you. So I think today's marketing strategy, today's business strategy must be marketing led. It's all about creating these amazing journeys to providing your version of the solution that they've already identified. You're not buying anybody. They're coming voluntarily, in my opinion.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm laughing because I can't remember the last time somebody said that they found what I'm saying to be abhorrent. So that's why I'm laughing. I feel like I did. So I shouldn't be talking about buying people, but winning customers is an investment, takes an investment of time, energy, and money. So maybe that's the better way of framing that. And maybe you're buying those transactions, and then you have to keep investing in those relationships, like you say, if you want to keep those customers and have the customer value increasing. So please, I'm not in the business of buying people,
no, to be
and
fair,
owning people.
You were quoting someone else. I didn't accuse you of that. And
Oh no, I've said that. I've said that hundreds of times to thousands of students. So maybe I need to think about that a little bit more carefully in the future.
The reason why I find it difficult to cope with is because, I've been doing this as a profession for over 30 years, and the idea that I'm out buying souls is I just find really makes my head hurt. So it's because it's always been an invite to do business.
Yes, and I think you're right. I think the customer is more informed and more empowered and more in control of, because when I was phoning people in 1992 and talking to them about advertising opportunities, they didn't know about advertising. They didn't know, they certainly hadn't spent an hour on YouTube looking at all the different reviews of the different, so they are more empowered. Customers are more empowered than they have ever been. And I think they are more motivated. And people, when I worked on the phones, used to say to me, Martin, don't you think if I wanted this, I would have called you? We had to manage that whole thing. Whereas now, absolutely, if they want something, then they're better empowered to do it. I'm a little bit surprised that you're resisting this, because my guy in Malta is a brand investment, brand ambassador. And he was saying that, so basically what he was saying is fighting the decline in value from commoditization. So that, I think, is a defense of kind of brand investments, because what he's talking about is there is commoditization, and the difference between a commodity and not a commodity is brand, is the relationship that you're talking about. Is that not true? Or
I wouldn't have said so. No, I don't see it quite as simply as that. I think a toilet roll is probably a commodity. I think bread is a commodity, and yet actually it still stands up to people have relationships with that commodity, and there's a difference between buying a Hovis or a Warburton's or a Kleenex or something like that. Now, I don't necessarily agree, but there are many drivers of the relationship. So if I don't have very much money, then I'm probably going to go for the cheaper version. Yeah, if I have a little bit more money and I want to feel a little bit more luxurious, I might go a different version. So I do sort of commend businesses to be very careful not to go down the commodity thinking, transactional thinking route in its own right and just rely on that. I think also, product life cycles, if you end up creating a product that's very popular and the sector grows and everybody has one, then inevitably you're going to be commodity. So therefore, yes, of course, you might get a distinctive thing. And I think the other thing strategically is people often muddle up what we call brand steal versus market growth. They're two different brand strategies, and they don't blend into one. Now, if you're in a market growth market, then your brand will be the thing that pulls you into the market. If you're in brand steal mode, then of course your brand is going to then pinch market share from other people around you. So you need a brand to just keep alive at commodity level, because you're effectively using the nature of your relationship to say we've got a better relationship with our commodity than our competitors. And that's what happens in a commodity market, is there's lots of competitors, and they're trying to cut you on price and distribution and all, packaging and all that sort of thing. So the brand has an entirely different strategic role in a commodity market to in other markets. So if you're launching a brand, you're probably going to be driving market growth. If you're launching brand into a brand steal market, then actually you're going to always probably find you're struggling. And it's going to be a very expensive thing, because you're effectively launching into an existing market, which is why, the adverts for your toothpaste always say the new, exciting, never done before toothpaste is still toothpaste. It's because they are adopting a brand steal strategy in a commodity market, and that's how you can use your brand. But it's also about access. It's also about service. It's also about all those sorts of things. It can be on a toothpaste. It can be how easy the top is to get off. How much toothpaste is left in the tube before you throw it away, and things like that. The whole environmental part of it, all that stuff. There are many dimensions to even a commodity market, so
Yes.
I don't think it's that simple.
But I think he sees commoditization as the risk. And I say this to people also. If you're in a market where it has become commoditized, where the only differentiator is the price, then basically you're screwed already, because somebody will come along who can offer it cheaper than you. And I think his point was that the brand brings value outside of that commodity. So you can defend your pricing if you've got that built-in value, which is that relationship that you're saying is the brand.
Yeah, I think that's. I understand that. I understand that. The reality is that if you've been running a business and you find yourself in a commodity market, then what you've got to do is you move that in the Boston matrix to cash cow, and you use the profits from that, although they're diminishing, to drive new stars in your portfolio. You do MPD, you develop different things away from the commodity, so that actually the commodity is simply funding your business and indeed the business growth. So from a business strategy point of view, if I saw that my product or service was becoming commodity, I would do everything to cash cow that for as long as possible, but use the cash for that to fund the next innovation that sits within the organisation, and then start to make money where I can get a premium on something that's entirely new. I think what tends to happen is people think they're only in that market, and they keep getting defensive and they cut costs. And you buy a Mars bar today, and the packet looks the same size, but when you open it, the Mars bar is about a third of the size of the actual packet, because they think, oh well, we can befuddle the buyer by saying it looks the same in the packet, but actually the Mars bar inside it's smaller. Or a bag of crisps is another good example. If you buy a small bag of crisps, there's like 4 crisps in the bottom, but the packets always stay the same size. That's just poor business planning, in my view, from a commodity point of view, because the language around marketing, sales, operations is all transactional. It's all commodity based, rather than saying, actually, we have an opportunity to build the relationship, which I guess is what he's saying. I just think if you genuinely found yourself in a commodity market, I would just cash cow it and use the money to create something new and exciting, from a brand point of view.
Okay, wow. So, yeah. So, but I'm thinking about, when I think about where brand has the greatest value, I think about perfume. It's scented water. And if it didn't have a brand on it at all, it probably wouldn't sell at all. Certainly not for the amounts of money that some people sell perfume for. That's where I think brand has, and you think about handbags. They put a Prada logo on a handbag that costs £5 to make, and they can sell it for £500. I don't know if these are the actual figures. I don't buy handbags, but this is where I see the huge value of brand. I actually had Chanel turn up to one of my marketing strategy trainings. I used to run these half-day trainings in London and Brighton and around there, and Chanel turned up, and I was astounded, amazed. And then afterwards, I kind of grabbed hold of this person, and she and had a conversation. And it's like, I'd like to come and do some stuff if Chanel are interested in this sort of stuff. She's like, Martin, you have to understand that we've got 8 people employed outside the United States, and so this business, Chanel, turns out is minuscule in terms of number of employees, range of products, actual value they're delivering in the world, but is a monolith in terms of global brand. So that is entirely about the relationship that people who buy Chanel have with Chanel. They must know that they're buying 25 pence worth of scented water for hundreds of pounds. They know that, and they like that, and that's the way I think about brand.
I actually genuinely don't think they know it's 25 pence worth of scented water. I think they don't need to think like that. See
Well,
that
to
again?
be
That's
fair, I don't know if it's 25 pence
no,
worth
no.
either,
But
so I don't want
I
to invite
don't.
Chanel
I
to
don't
sue
think
me.
anybody buys Chanel and thinks, I wonder what the cost of manufacture was for this
No.
and why I'm paying that. I genuinely don't think people even get that far.
And that is the power of brand, isn't it? Because you're actually thinking, I'm buying a Chanel product rather than what am I? And maybe at that point you're so far removed away from caring about what it costs that you just don't care. You don't think about those things.
Yeah, and I genuinely don't think people think about that because they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their image. They're thinking about their style. The way they deal with life includes
Yes.
Chanel. So therefore,
Yes.
they're buying that as a piece of armory to go out and face a modern world. I think where I would choose to answer your question about the value of brand is, let's look at all of the brands that are dominating: Google, Facebook, Expedia, Airbnb, Deliveroo, Just Eat, Alibaba, Amazon. What one thing do they all have in common? One thing do they all have in common?
Well, I think my idea of what they have in common is different from yours. So let's hear yours first.
No. I've got an answer. What's your answer?
No,
What do you
my answer would be, because of the way my mind works, is that essentially those brands are largely monopolies. You know, Facebook don't have competition, Google don't have competition, Amazon don't have competition. You know, so I would say this that's the first thing that occurs to
eBay,
me.
we'll add eBay in. I can add eBay in as well. Okay. So obviously they all do have competition. I think you've got Yahoo and MSN for Google. You know, so they all do. I can find competition for all. Amazon's got all sorts of competitors. The one thing that my answer, and thank you for your answer because it's a legitimate answer, but my answer is that none of them produce the product they sell. None of them, right? It's all they're
Okay.
selling other people's stuff. So for me, this is where brand has moved to. Brand has moved to, it's all about the way you do things. It's the way you nurture the relationships emotionally and rationally, right? That's the defining feature. These businesses I've just quoted are worth gazillions on the stock market, right? For all sorts, whether rightly or wrongly, but they do not produce the product. They sell other people's stuff, right? And I think one of the challenges that producers have, whether it's of a product or a service, is they can't get their head around the fact that actually they have to layer a relationship tool. And so what's happening is the gatekeepers are jumping in with their clear understanding what a brand is, because it's all about the way you do things, the relationship building criteria. And these people are becoming the gatekeepers for everybody else. And actually, this started in the 70s when supermarkets started. Most of my period on Bird's Eye was always about, actually there were two marketing strategies that went in place. There was the one that was producing the advertising to get people to buy it, but the other one was about persuading Tesco's and Sainsbury's to list the product, because they were the gatekeepers. And if you didn't have a listing, it didn't matter how credible your advertising was, people couldn't buy your product. And at the time, Tesco's and Sainsbury's represented something like 70% of all purchases out of the freezer. You know, so yeah, there was Iceland and a couple of others, you know. But the reality was, if you didn't get Tesco's, if you didn't get Sainsbury's, you were dead in the water as a product provider. And they were the gatekeepers. Today's gatekeepers are all the ones I've just listed. The brand is Sainsbury's. The brand is Waitrose. The brand is Asda and Tesco's. They're the brands now. And what are they? They're just buildings, you know, with shelves. But actually what they've understood is how to create the car parks and experience and all that sort of thing, and the way it works and all that sort of thing. And I'm sorry, guys, but if you are a product provider or a service provider, you have to understand that today's brand is about building commercial relationships. In other words, you've got to change everything in your business so that it is orientated towards the buyer, away from the business owner. And that's where I make my money, Martin, because I go into organisations where the business owner's gone, actually, I've got this, but I have no idea how to do it. So I go into organisations and I completely turn the whole organisation from the shop floor, from the warehouse, right up to the board level, so that everybody's looking at the buyer instead of trying to improve operations, trying to cut costs, trying to do all those sorts of things. There's plenty of people in the business that are going to concentrate on that. But the reality is you have to move your business away from transactional mindset towards relationship building mindset with the marketplace.
Okay, good. And I think I agree with you 100%. I do. But for me, if a business ever thought that it was about anything, I'm going to say it again. If they ever thought, I know you don't like it, I'm going to risk your wrath. I'm going to risk you calling me abhorrent again. But if a business ever thought that this was about anything other than finding and winning and keeping customers profitably, then they were just wrong. All on their own, wrong. But that is what most businesses think. I mean, they don't think that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter how good your donuts are. If no one buys them, you don't have a business. It doesn't matter how good anything that you do is. If nobody fronts up with the money to buy it from you, you're not in business. It's as simple as that. And this is kind of my raison d'etre, is just to get people to understand that. If you can find it, and for me, it's a puzzle, it's a riddle that has to be fixed. What amount of this, what amount of that, what amount of something else, what message, what offer, what, all these things. Work that out. Where are these people? Who are these people? Work out all of that stuff. And you can be finding, winning, and keeping customers profitably. You can be doing that, and then you're a really successful business.
Yeah. So okay. So I agree that at board level, at marketing strategy level and business level, what actually is I change it slightly now, is you don't find anybody, you get found. And the trick with marketing strategies now, you have to get found, because I'm telling you, all the business that you ever require to sustain any business plan that you put in front of me, there are people on the keyboards now looking for you. You need to get found. You don't need to find anybody. That's a broadcast mindset. It is outdated. It ran out of steam probably 10 years ago. It's now, what you've got to do is you've got to get found. Once you get found, you've got to be welcoming, and that's your nurturing. So you've still got to nurture people in. So I think in my world, the bottom of the bucket is still the same. You've got to nurture them in, but you've got to do that in a way which is about helping them to buy from you. So the nurturing. So first of all, you've got to get found. Then you've got to help people to buy from you. And then when they bought from you, you've got to deliver something truly amazing, right? And if you do those three things, get found, help people to buy from you, and be amazing once they buy from you, you will have more than a sustainable business. And there is no finding, nurturing, all of it, because for me, that's always the power is with the brand owner. It isn't, it's with the buyer. So you've got to get found, help people to buy from you, and then be amazing once they have bought from you. So that actually what they go is, wow, this was really great value. I've given you my token of value exchange, money or time, and you've rewarded me in spades. Now, the reason you can do that is because you're producing what they need on a mass scale, so therefore the unit cost comes down. If I wanted a Porsche, I could go and build one, a kit car Porsche. It wouldn't be exactly the same, but I could build one. But it'd probably take me 10 years, yeah? Or I can work for a shorter period of time and go and buy one from more or less everything. Knowledge economy means that very little we can't produce ourselves or do ourselves. But the enemy that we have is time. And actually what most businesses are selling is time. It comes in the form of money. So it just means that I can fast track to the toilet roll, the loaf of bread, the car, the house, the holiday, whatever, the delivered food. I can fast track to that. And I'm buying that experience, that way of living life from people. It's got nothing to do with the product, nothing to do with the price, really, because I don't mind paying a bit more if it really improves my quality of life. And so I commend anybody listening here to really, really engage the idea of getting found, make buying from you amazing, really easy, and then make owning your product or service amazing, and investing all of that. Now, this is where only the marketing people do. You put the ops guy in there and they'll go, oh, that's systems, I can't do that, it's all too difficult, we need to automate everything, put it into a CRM, we don't want any human intervention, blah, 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 etc. So it's cost too much. You got the FD sitting there, so cost, you keep throwing, you want to improve the shopping bag that you give people the items in. Yeah, that's what I want to do, because that's the experience, that's a wow, etc. Only the marketing people are sitting there going, we need to put in place how you get found, make buying from us amazing, and then make the experience of owning the product or service truly amazing. That only marketing people think like that and talk like that. You and me.
Okay, good. Right, so firstly, there is some finding still going on. I agree with you 100%. It's grossly ineffective, it's grossly inefficient, but there is still the kinds of businesses that I worked for that didn't invest in being found at all are still out there, and they're still not investing in being found. Now, my realization when I became the effective marketing company and digital marketing happened and Google happened and all this stuff is that those 10 years that I'd been the hunter-gatherer, while I'd been out looking for customers, there had been motivated buyers looking for me that we never met because they were never going to find me because I'm always out looking. So I'm 100% in agreement with you about that. And for me, now marketing is all about positioning, because somebody who finds you, like you say, is a motivated buyer. And lots of the objections go away. Even the price objection goes away because they're aware of all the range of prices and they've decided to talk to you at your price. So, it is much easier to sell. In fact, it's pretty hard to sell. Like we were selling SEO at one point in our lives. Like you get to the top of Google for SEO services. It's pretty hard not to sell to those people when they pick up the phone and say, I found you at the top of Google and I want to do this. And there is something weird going on. Like I still get emails every day from people saying, do you want us to help you with your SEO? It's like, well, if you know that SEO works and you're capable of making it work, why are you broadcasting to me? So I'm with you 100%, but there is still finding going on. But you're right. I need to replace the word finding with something else, but there's nothing that scans quite as well as finding or being found. So I agree with you 100%. Now, you're a psychology student, is that what you said?
Yeah, I've got a degree in psychology.
Okay, so twice in my life I've experienced this. So this might be the rule that proves the theory or whatever, the exception that proves the rule or whatever. At one time in my life, we were selling high-end event-type stuff to brands, to your IBMs, your PricewaterhouseCoopers, your these kinds of people. It was a lot of money, but what we were essentially doing is bringing buyers and sellers together. So we would bring in the top 200, let's say, the top 200 buyers in a particular market that IBM are interested in, and we would bring in then 30 people, and they would have appointments over the course of this thing. It was a lot of money. It was like £50,000. The only way you could sell this to like a country manager or a managing director of one of these brands, I promise you, was to phone up and shit on them and tell them basically, this is what I'm doing, but this isn't going to work for you because you're not worthy, essentially. And whatever objection they come up with, you just say, well, you know what, if you can't make this work, then just go away. Do you know what I mean? You're wasting my time. It was like a boiler room kind of situation, but I promise you I tried it every way, because the kind of salesperson I was a relationship, make it amazing, make it easy for them to buy all that stuff. Didn't fly for a second. You literally had to get hold of these people, shit on them, and then they would buy. Do you know what I mean? If you box them into the corner. So it was like that reverse psychology. I've got this amazing thing. You're not worthy of it. You can't have it. You know, that's the way that worked. The second one is kind of different, but it proves the same point. There's a restaurant in Cologne in Germany where they have, you know, these huge pork knuckles that they eat. Is it called? Yes. There's this restaurant, and they are famous for being incredibly rude. Like, when you walk in, they will not acknowledge you. And, like, my friend said to them, they won't acknowledge you. They drink those little, tiny little beers. If they're not there topping it up, like, you're thirsty, let alone not getting drunk. But my friend had the audacity to ask them for some mayonnaise. And do you know what they said? They said, you want mayonnaise? There's a kiosk over the road. Go and buy your own mayonnaise. to the point with this thing where apparently one of the presidents, President Obama or President Clinton, wanted to go to this restaurant, but they said, look, you'll have to close the restaurant because, security and stuff. They're like, no, stuff you. We're not closing our restaurant. It's like, so sometimes, like you're saying, be amazing, make it easy for people to buy, but sometimes the exact opposite is what's required if you're going to sell something.
The great thing about my industry and being creative, see, I think that's a creative solution to the challenge. Yeah.
Right.
The reality is the people who one of my favourite lines is a line for the army, which is 99.9% need not apply. Right, and that was a campaign they ran for quite some time. They did this amazing thing. People in the army, etc., 99 point, and you wanted to know whether you could apply and get through, and whether you were part of the 1%. So I don't have a problem with the reverse psychology, and actually but what I would say is that if the brand is well known, if this restaurant is well known for being rude, if people don't like people being rude to them, they're never going to go there. Right, so the only people that are going to go there are going to go, I want a taste of somebody being abjectly rude to me, because that sounds like fun and all that sort of thing, and that's their brand approach. And so that's just a tactic, Martin. It's not a brand strategy; it's a tactic. It's a legitimate tactic. It works. I'm thankful that the rest of the world doesn't think that everybody should do that. Otherwise, we'd live in a torrid world of people, trying to reverse psychologists all the time. But that is absolutely not where we're at the moment. Most people are so well informed about everything that they wake up and decide what their problem is. They decide what their solution is long before they go into the buying market. So when people approach you, don't have a website that tells me that you've been going 35 years and you've got all these amazing stuff and everything. Help me buy. I'm not interested in you. I've already found all that out. I know more about you than you know about yourself when I contact you. So don't befuddle me with this outbound, this is how great we are and these are all our products. SEO is a great example. I typed in, so there was an incident in Egypt, I think, and Egypt weren't getting any tourism. So I thought, I said to my wife, this is a great time to go to Egypt because it's dirt cheap and the security is going to be max high because they want to keep things. So I logged on, clicked on holidays to Egypt on Thompson's or one of the big holiday, Horizon or one of the big holiday companies, and it took me to a ski page, right, because it was ski season. And I thought, you are lemons. I've typed in, I want a holiday in Egypt, and you've taken me to a ski page. And I couldn't for love nor money find the link to the Egypt trips, right? I just couldn't find it. Even though SEO said, cheap trips to Egypt via whatever the holiday company was. Right, clicked on that, and it took me to their front page skit. And I had to wade through all this stuff. Stop doing that. Make it easy to buy. If I've typed in Egypt, take me to the Egypt page. Right, and say, wow, if you buy this in the next 15 minutes, you're going to get even cheaper still. And I have a real problem with this outbound mindset now that still sits within product producers, service producers, and meanwhile, all the gatekeepers, all the people who are the consolidators, all those sort of things are mopping up the relationships with the market in such a way as in the end you won't be able to sell unless you sell via any of the Deliveroo's, Airbnbs, Amazons. Well, Amazon and Google control the market. It's they're the gatekeepers to the whole market because they get that it's about the relationship with the buyer, and they built their whole machine so it's all about one click. Pay here, delivered in the next 4 hours, blah, blah, blah. Don't leave your chair. We'll have this product with you straight away. If you don't like it, back it up, send it back. It's, why would you leave your desk for anything? When the Amazons and the Expedias and the Deliveroos, because they get it. They get it. And unless you as a business get that right now, I'm sorry, you are going to be gone. In a very short space of time, in my opinion, or you become simply part of the commodity infrastructure that sits behind, and what you're doing is you're forever running around, cost cutting, trying to find efficient ways of doing it, so you can sell via Amazon or eBay or Expedia or whatever. And I think that's very, very sad, because not all buyers want to go via those routes. They kind of like to buy direct, so
Yes.
build it round that way.
Okay, good. Are you ready for another challenge then?
Yeah, go on.
Right. So, because I've worked with these tools, like, thankfully I don't have to do it now, but I would argue that, the argument is out there, generally accepted, that the product of these tech companies are the markets, individuals, like, so that's that. Their customers, in fact, are you and I, the marketers. And they don't care about us at all. They don't, their services, like somebody decides to change something at Facebook, it's changed globally, or at Google, it's changed globally. There's no feedback, there's no anything else. So because I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, I do enjoy a conspiracy theorist, but if I think about this conspiratorially, what I think is that these businesses have kind of helped themselves to huge swathes of marketing budgets. And it's interesting what you say about advertising having gone away, because I think it did go away, but now it's come full circle and it's back. It's just that the businesses that are taking that advertising budget are Facebook, Google, Twitter, if you're, these types of business, Amazon. So I don't 100% agree with you that they are looking after their market. When, you saw that Facebook came out and was valued as $1 trillion company, I was thinking about that in an advertising perspective. I don't know, obviously being $1 trillion company doesn't mean that they've taken $1 trillion in sales, but whatever they have taken in sales, 25 years ago, an advertising agency would have been due 10 or 15% of that. So Facebook should have made millionaires out of all of us advertising guys as well, but very conveniently they didn't, So this is the way my mind thinks when I'm not actually talking to people. So I think it's interesting what you're saying. It's 100% correct. It's about being found. Like there is no more efficient way to make sales than to be picking up the phone and saying to people, can I help you with this thing? Certainly anyone who is prospecting, I think of it as marketing and canvassing now. Like if you're relying on your salespeople to do your marketing, all they can do is canvassing, and it's grossly inefficient and it's likely to fail. And it almost doesn't matter what industry you're in, that is the case now. So I would argue that Facebook, Google, these people, they don't particularly know about their customers, who are the people who are spending the marketing budgets with them, and they don't particularly care about them because they've got the market. And I'd say it's the same with the restaurant in Cologne. They're not saying we're going to be rude to you because it's good marketing. No one ever sat down and said let's be rude to everyone. But what they're saying is our product is so good that we don't have to pander to you in any way, shape or form. And maybe this is what Google and Facebook are doing also. So we don't have to pander to you in any way, shape or form. You are going to come, not because you enjoy people being rude to you, but because you're going to really enjoy the product. And it doesn't matter how we package it. It's that good, you're going to enjoy it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, so I still think we need to be careful not to use the restaurant Cologne as a strategic driver. It's a great tactic. And yes, there's a way of making a product more desirable by making it more difficult to get. There's a place down the road from where I am. It sells Morgans. I think the waiting list is 2 years, right? So people go in there and they wait 2 years for a Morgan, and I'm sure that's true for many other things. I've spoke to the guy there. He said we've got orders for the next 5 years. He said because there's a 2-year waiting list. He said we even run a market for people selling their Morgan before they've ever owned it because they've been waiting 2 years. They've got to 12 months. They're paying for it, and then they don't want it in the end, and they sell it on for more than they pay for it. There's all sorts of things going on that. So I get the tactic of making things more desirable by making them more difficult or more awkward. But the psychology behind that, the psychographic behind that, is the people who buy into that. And so therefore they're more sticky, they're more likely to go for that. The reality is that restaurant would do just as well by people by people being nice. Yeah, in fact, they might be busier. And in fact, one of the ways of being the rude might mean that they can cope with the busyness that they're at. They're always full, and therefore they can carry on being. Actually, if they were nice, they might have people queuing around the door, and then they'd have to disappoint lots of people. And then suddenly the brand reputation is, I wouldn't go there because it's always too busy and you can never get in, right? Because they're nice, right? So I don't think if the product's that great, actually being nice or not nice is going to make any difference to that. I think it's just part of the tactic, and I like it, and it's fun, and all that sort of thing, and it's a great reputation to have. But if they were to open a chain of the restaurants with the same product, they might need to be nice in other places because they might not get away with that. So I think that's a tactic. I think I still would suggest that. So let's look at Facebook. Facebook and indeed Google really struggled to begin with because they were free to use services. Yeah, and what they've had to do is their business model, their valuation of $1 trillion has got nothing to do with turnover, right? It's not related to that. We're talking about valuation there. What they are selling is confidence in the relationship with them as a business, that they're going to carry on and they're going to make money. Because of course what they've had to do is they've had to really reverse their whole free to use, everybody can sign up to Facebook and everything, because what they did was they sold the connectivity between lots and lots of different people. Having done that, now they can manipulate that community, right? And what will happen is, it wouldn't surprise me if one day Facebook suddenly disappears overnight, like MySpace or all of these places, because what happens is society goes, actually, we don't like using Facebook because we don't, Google, the chairman of Google stood up, 10 years ago and said, one day we will know everything about everybody on the planet. And immediately, and I think it's still true that Yahoo in America is as popular as Google in America. I think Google's number one elsewhere in the world, but I think in America, I still think they've got a bit of a battle going on for leadership. I don't know if that's true, but it was certainly true a few years ago that everybody switched to Yahoo because they didn't like what the chairman of Google had said about owning all their information. They're also running algorithms on everything. They're changing everything. They're trying to refine things. It's and YouTube are doing the same. YouTube. Every time you get your new terms and conditions appear in your inbox for your membership of YouTube or whatever, it's worth reading them because it's scary what they're doing. So, for example, on YouTube now, they've changed the terms and conditions. They now own your film when you post it. So before it used to belong to you, now it belongs to YouTube. And that effectively means that YouTube now have overall rights for your film, whatever you put up on YouTube. And they've just snuck that in. Nobody's really noticed. And actually, when you start to think about that conceptually, you think, whoa, that's amazing. And the reason why they've done it is so that they can put an ad on it. Because they own your film, they can then run an ad on it. So what they do is they monitor it to see if it gets lots of views, and then suddenly you'll find that to view your own ad, you've got to click through an ad. You've got to do a 3-second skip or a 5-second skip, or you have to watch the ad in completion, because they now own your film. They're using it as a medium, and that they changed those terms and conditions about 3 months ago, and it's gone through unnoticed. But they're in business. They're providing a medium. It's free to upload your films. As they always say, if it doesn't cost you anything to join something, you're the product. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they're doing. And I think people know that they're the product if they're signing on to something free. They know that, and they're quite forgiving of it. I talk to my children, and they go, "Yeah, that's all right. I don't mind. I don't really care. They can have whatever they want about me. It's all out there anyway, so they can have whatever they want. So if they want to use my profile and my thing to build their business, I'm really relaxed about it." So, but all of these are tactics, business strategies. I don't really have any problem. They don't really have any bearing on brand, in the sense that the risk in their business is suddenly there's a huge sway. The one thing happens that Facebook are using it to start wars or cause poverty or something like that. You only need some conspiracy theory to gather enough momentum, and they're suddenly out of court, like we see in politics. We suddenly see, suddenly somebody in one of the parties does something crazy right at a critical point, and that party's finished. Is not going to win the next election. And I think these businesses run the risk of that. They're so big. They're also they're doing what's interesting, what I said earlier. They have understood that the moment they become commodity, they buy something that isn't commodity. So you look at what Google owns, or what their holding company owns. It's astonishing what they own. Hundreds and hundreds of companies.
Yes.
Amazon own hundreds and hundreds, but absolutely nothing to do with the Amazon that you and I think as Amazon. And when you start to look at the taxonomy of those businesses, you think, oh my goodness, because they know that any time, any part of their mix can catch a cold and be gone overnight because they live that way. But then they've got all these other businesses that they can just fire up and go. That's the scary bit. Is the fact that there's probably somebody's done a chart which says there's only 8 companies that own all of the companies in the world. It's kind of,
yes.
Just unfortunately, it's not you and not me. We're still out here flailing around, doing our own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%. And Facebook, I think, right now is in trouble. I don't know if you're up to date with what's going on between Facebook and Apple, but I've seen, obviously this isn't. I mean, I have seen it in terms of the campaigns that I run. Over the last 4 or 5 years, people are much less interested in Facebook. They just are. I'm not interested in it anymore. I don't, I'll message somebody on Facebook if that's the only way I'm in touch with them. It will be weeks before I get a response, and they'll say, I'm sorry, I just don't look at this anymore, Yeah. But they've got Instagram potentially. But now I think Facebook is really, but I saw something yesterday saying they'll go to the next level. But basically, Apple now are denying them the cookies, the knowledge of the market who are using them through that process. So I think Facebook could become a MySpace really, really quickly and really easily.
I think
just
so.
go away.
So.
Yeah. And that could happen kind of any time. And I don't think many people would miss it if that were to happen. That's what's interesting about that. The thing that you were saying before about when you were looking for your Egypt holiday and you looked at you went to Google and you looked at the natural rankings, the organic rankings, that is a failure of Google. They have optimized that ski page over the Egypt page. That's one thing. What I see mostly is people paying for those clicks. So you will see a PPC. So you will search for Egypt holidays. They'll be ranked at the top, and they've got absolute the marketing person who put that together has absolute control of where they put you in their website. And they will take you still to a ski holidays
to the homepage. Well, they'll take you to the homepage. Yeah. Because they're still in broadcast mindset. We need to build our business, our messaging, our presence in the market via what we consider to be the most important thing about us as a brand, rather than you as a buyer.
Yes.
And so instead of taking me to the Egypt page and saying, look, Egypt, we can do your holiday in Egypt, but actually, if you're thinking about going away at this time, the snow's never been better. If you like skiing, you should check out our skiing. And you go, oh, actually, that's a good point. Maybe we should go skiing rather than go to Egypt. You can do it in a much, much more buyer-centric way than forcing me through your way of doing things. Do it in my way, and that's why I keep saying it's all about getting found, making it easy to buy, and then make the experience amazing. That's the core strategy. And there's lots of ways of helping people find you really easily. And that's where I think strategically businesses should be spending their time creating a brand presence, not a tactical thing. Actually, there's an overriding strategy there of being helpful and insightful and helping people make sense of their buying decision. If your presence in the market saying, look, we live and breathe this particular thing that we sell, and if you're thinking of buying this kind of thing, this is what you should consider, this is what you might want to consider. And that may end up being that you don't buy from us, you buy from somebody else, but here's how you should buy. And then people go, that's really, you've been really helpful. How do I buy from you? And you go, easy peasy. this is the way you do it, and then when they buy from you, that's the strategy right now for all businesses. My problem is that I go into the board meetings, and the majority of the conversation is about how they do things better for themselves, how they cut costs, how they make the systems work, how they manage the flux of the resources that they've got, and hardly ever do they mention the buyers. And you go, okay,
No.
And so they look at me and go, what do you think? Well, I mean, I go, great. It's been the last 45 minutes have been really interesting, but you haven't mentioned the buyers once. It all sounds irrelevant to me. And they go, and just look at me and go, and the bright ones say, of course, that's why we're here. What would you do? So it's that, and that's what it's about right now. And that's what a brand is. It's commercialized relationships. Got next to nothing to do with the product, next to nothing to do with the service. Clearly, you've got to have that, and it's got to be okay, and it's got to be, affordable by your market. All of those things, of course. But what people are buying is your style, your way of doing things, how you fit in and dovetail into the kind of life they want to lead.
Yes. Okay, good. And I agree with you 100%. When I'm teaching digital marketing, I tell them this should be like slipping on ice or falling through a trapdoor for your clients or your customers. You should move all resistance. So I would say, and part of the problem with marketing, or even being a business owner, that I've always experienced, is it becomes egotistical. It becomes about them as the business owner and what they want and what they want to see and what they want to do. And really effective marketing is just about serving the market. And somebody I used to work with as a sales trainer, he said that the word sales is a derivative of the word selja in ancient Norse, which means to serve. And I love the idea of that. Yeah. The only issue I've got with what you're saying is I 100% want to believe it, but I still think people are buying junk and selling junk, and that's really the only question mark that I have about it.
Oh, listen. I would have said probably 90% of businesses are still selling old school.
Yes.
So all I'm saying is that if you're watching this, right, if you're partaking of this particular session, you're already enlightened to the idea that there is a different way of doing things, right? So our responsibility, your and my responsibility, is to enable those people to just think there's another way, a different way, and start to look outside the old school way. And I think that's the function of sessions like this. And I willingly do them with anybody at any time, because I'm in a privileged position of having spent over 30 years putting brands into marketplaces, how it's changed, how it's worked. If you want to be a brand that's sustainable, that has its premise in the right place, that understands its market, understands its buyer community, you have to adopt this way of brand. If you don't care about that, if you just think I'm in this for an exit plan or a quick win, or I'm going to make as much money out of this product and I'm going to do it for 5 or 10 years and that'll be enough, listen, then you can follow the old school ways. All I'm saying is that buyers right now, they're getting smarter, they're getting more educated and more sophisticated. They will eschew your advances. We receive 18,000 marketing messages every single day, right? I'm sure we haven't got time, but if I asked you to list out the 18,000 that you saw yesterday, what would you say? 4,000 of them were entirely new ones, that you'd not seen before.
I've got no idea.
No idea, correct. And actually, if I asked you to do 100 of the 18,000, you'd struggle, right? The reality is that the human way of life, but in the developed West, I know it's appreciated different in the East, and I've done work in the Middle East and stuff like that. It's very different there, but right here in the West, people just delete all of that stuff. They just can't. So we know that we're being bombarded by every single physical surface with a marketing message. Everything's got a logo on it. Everything's got a bit of design on it. Everything's like that, and that's where they get the 18,000 from. And the reality is that we just delete it all. We just ignore it. until we are ready to buy. And then we go, actually, I've got a problem. Right, okay. It's the old, I buy a red car, and then I think, because I don't think anyone's got a red car, and then I drive out and I see 30 red cars. Your brain suddenly orientates towards what you're looking for. And at that point, you enter into the knowledge economy, the digital economy, and you go, okay, I'm looking for this. I'm looking at it. And then Amazon pops up or Google pops up, whatever. You go, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And they go, and people who bought that bought this. And you go, that's quite interesting. And actually what you end up doing is buying from the organisation that seems to service your needs, your problem, and actually they provide a solution, and it's really easy to buy from them. They're the ones that are winning out. And I'm afraid, if you are genuinely committed to adding marketing into your mix and believing and becoming marketing led, these are the strategies you've got to pursue. So I'm of the opinion you don't need a sales force at all anymore. I think what you need is an account management force, which is when people arrive at your doors, you have a team of people that effectively account handle them into the relationship. And I don't think you need salespeople at all anymore. That doesn't mean there's plenty of room for salespeople. There's plenty of organisations. But I'm working with an organisation now, and they've invested most in their sales department. And we say, how's it going? And they're going, we can't cope with the leads that you're bringing us. And I go, okay, so what selling are you doing? And they go, oh, no. And you can see the head of sales, who's great, who's really good, is not doing what she is really good at, which is hitting the phones and persuading people who've never heard of them to do work with them. She doesn't need to, because the marketing and all the social media and all the things that we're doing, all the insightful, making sense stuff that we're doing, is bringing enough things that the phone just rings and the leads come through the CRM, and they're handling all of that, and she's hitting her numbers. So, do you need a sales force? I don't think you do. I think you need an account handling department, a nurturing department, I think, as we used early, and we just need to get found. If you put in place a strategy to get found, and people will find you, and when they find you, go, really pleased you found us. How do we make this an amazing experience for you? And I think that's the way it is now. In any business. I defy anyone to persuade me that otherwise. I was working with a roaming company that clears calls between telecom operators across the globe. Even they turned around and went, okay, actually we've got people calling us to say, how can we do their clearing? There's enough business for everyone. I can assure you.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to try and dissuade you, because I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I have absolutely loved this conversation.
Me too.
I haven't been too challenging. But, it's really interesting. And it's because you've always been brand, and for a long time I wasn't brand. I think that's where the difference is. And I think you're absolutely right. I think this has been the case for a long time. You've got to have some kind of relationship with your customers. We all have brand relationships. This is what I do. This is my shtick. When I teach brand now, I tell them, when I buy sunglasses, it's this brand. If I buy pants and socks, it's this brand. If I buy shirts, it's this brand. If I buy a barbecue, it's this brand. If I buy a mountain bike, it's this brand. My camera is, we all have these relationships. And this is what the actual brands understand, and why they invest so much money and time and energy in it, is because they know, not to upset you again, but they know that they can invest in, to some degree, owning this customer. So when they are thinking about buying something that they offer, it's them that they think of first, and them that they go to.
Yeah,
I really don't want to upset you again.
I don't disagree with that at all, Martin. I think you should invest in owning the relationship with the people that buy from you. Well, we in my business, I don't use the word that you're using very often, if at all. We call that our C word. We also have an F word as well, but that's a different conversation. But we never refer to buyers as customers, because in neuroscience terms, what that does is it moves your brain to, I'm already in a relationship with these people. And therefore you become lazy, and you become much more self-centered and all that sort of thing. So I teach organizations to never use the word customer in their business. And I say we call it a C word. I'm not allowed to use the word in my own business. So what do we call them instead? So all of the focus is always about prospects. then so actually we only ever use the word prospect. So because the moment you use the word prospect, you go, okay, I need to work harder, put more energy into the relationship, find nattier ways of attracting them and engaging them and nurturing them and all the things that we've talked about them when they find us. And then 4 or 5 years ago, we went through a very intellectual process to say, okay, if you can't use the C word, and there are many C words, clients, consumers, customers, users, or they're all the equivalent of the C word, because what your brain does is you go, yeah, I'm already in a relationship with these people, so therefore I can miss things out and not be very nice to them and treat them as commodity and just, part of the business plan. So we then spent a long time trying to find up a phrase, and the phrase we use is paying prospects. And actually, so we talk about the people who buy from us as paying prospects. Now, what that does in an organization, it fundamentally shifts culturally the relationship to being about looking after the people, because they're still prospects. And actually, the logic train on that was they were prospects before, they're still prospects after. Actually, when they become your customer, client, consumer, they're all of your competitors' prospects. So what's happening is the competition are nibbling at them with prospect approaches, engagement strategies. And eventually, and I can't tell you how many businesses go, okay, what's your attrition rate? It's this. What happened when they went? I don't know, they just went. Well, you must have known they were going to go. No, we didn't know they were going to go, and they just rang up and said, we're not doing it. Did you ask them where they were going? Well, no, we didn't. And you go, okay. And then the ones that do, they go, yeah, they've gone to our competitor. Right, okay, well, at what point did the relationship break down to a point where you thought, actually, the relationship with this guy is not very strong, or this buyer is not very strong, and they must be talking to the competition? And that's because you forgot to treat them like a prospect all of the time. So we talk about prospects, and then after purchase, paying prospects. So in other words, the culture, the design, is all marketing led. It's always about ringing people up and saying, how's it going? We've got this extra thing that we found out about the product, about the service. We thought we'd let you know. And actually what happens is the people who pursue the getting found strategy are using insight and making sense. If you discover something that will help the market make sense, give it to the people who buy from you right now first. Treat them as prospects, paying prospects, and ring them up and say, we've got this amazing thing. We're going to run this campaign about this new way of using our product or a new dimension to our service, and we're giving it to you first. And what they just go is, oh, that's thanks for thinking of us, thanks for looking after me, thanks for enhancing my use of your product. And that only happens when you treat the people who buy from us as prospects. So we adopted the C word strategy, so we don't use it at all in anything, and the F word is something different. That's related to sales funnels. And there I'll pay money later, because obviously we use a bucket to keep people, and we eschew entirely the concept of the F word. So we have an F word and a C word. So just for fun.
Good. Okay, good. You're going to have to stop saying such interesting things, Barnaby, because we're already an hour and a half into this. But I agree. I'd always called them customers because people are in the habit of progressing this thing like prematurely. So, for example, I remember somebody was buying some data from us once, and that was fine. They phoned up and said, "Can we have some data?" And we're like, "We can." And then we source the data, and then and then they phone up and they say, "When are we getting these leads?" It's like, at what point did this stop becoming leads and start becoming data? And they do the same thing with like a lead becoming a customer. So that's really interesting and useful. And I'm with you 100% on the sales funnel thing. And the other thing is like, what do they call it? They call it like a sales process. Like you have to go through our sales process. And I've just said like to everyone I've ever trained in selling is actually find out what their buying process is and just do that. You know what I mean? You will make 100% of those sales.
Listen, the reality is that much of what you said aligns with what I'm saying. It's just a simple change of psychology and everything. A phrase like "find out what their buying process is exactly about getting found and then making it easy for them to buy from you. And that's about finding out what their process of buying is. But the focal point of that is that they are the hero of that journey, not your systems and processes.
Yes.
And now the challenge for people, and I get this, is scalability, because of course then every single relationship is bespoke. And therefore people say, well, we got to put them through our fixed CRM, blah, blah, into accounts, all that sort of thing. And I go, okay, you're right, but that is the process. The system is you put in place marketing thinking, brand thinking, relationship stuff. So what you do is you build the system. So you just say, how would you like to buy from us? And actually, do you want to swipe a card? Do you want to pay online? Do you want to pay on an account? Do you want to do, put it all in there so they can do it the way they want to do it,
yes.
and be ready for that. And it just needs a little bit more work, a little bit more effort, and then people love you for it. They love you for it, and they go, I wouldn't go anywhere else, even though there's cheaper, possibly even better quality product. I just wouldn't go anywhere else, because you always greet me as Mr. Wynter at the top of the show. You greet me as Mr. So that's your style, that's what you do, and that what you're doing is giving me permission to say, I prefer it if you didn't call me Mr. Wynter. Thank you for doing that. That's how I guess the formality of it. Now can we be Barnaby and Martin? And then suddenly the relationship is stronger, because I know why you're doing it, because it makes the relationship stronger, because you're gaining permission to be more personal. I get all that. I think you're probably doing all those things. It's just about overlaying the right idea that brand is every experience that affects the relationship between the product or service and the buyer. That's what a brand is today. It's not an outbound thing. It's about really sitting down with a prospect and saying, what kind of relationship would you want from us? Okay, we'll build the relationship that way, and then after they bought from you, treat them as a paying prospect, so you maintain that relationship at all times, keep enhancing it, keep nurturing it, and they'll stay with you for a long time.
And that is the mission. That is how you be in business profitably. I 100% agree with you. The last thing I'm going to slightly push back on is you're calling this marketing thinking. And I don't think it is universal marketing thinking or anywhere near. Like, this is, for me, 100% true and right, and this is the way it should be. But I don't think marketing is thinking like this.
Oh, no, I agree.
Hopefully they will.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, and listen, I'm making a very good business out of the few people that go, actually, that really resonates with what we're struggling with at the moment, and we can't quite nail it, because when we go into the marketing industry, they don't forget the whole marketing industry is its revenue model is broadcast thinking.
Yes,
it has not yet adapted to this thinking, and it hates the idea of people like me going, okay, so it's not about broadcast. No, it's all about narrowcast. It's all about niche. It's all about getting people to find you. There are cheap, simple ways of doing that. You don't need to spend millions of pounds on fancy ads and blasting the marketplace. You just don't need to do that anymore, because people are waking up and wanting you. What you do have to do is when they start to look for you, you've got to get found. You've got to be where they are, so you still need to understand the target market in the same way. But now what you do is you track where they go, and you get present in there, and you help them be who they want to be at every step of the way. And eventually, it's a Venus flytrap. They can't avoid coming into you. The nectar is there at the bottom of the Venus flytrap. They come, and then you just bring them in, and eventually the relationship is so strong that it's much harder to break. And that's what a brand is. It's a really strong relationship. As you described, your narrative, you can describe your whole life narrative via the brands that you've got around you, because they fit with your image dimensions. They've worked. They're cool. They're whatever you want, and they're reliable, and they're affordable, and all that sort of thing. And actually, you can lead the life you want to lead as an individual, as Martin Henley, using these brands. And then you can play around with others and fiddle around, and then you find another one that's really good, and you lock that in. And over time, you get a whole portfolio going, I only use this, and I only use that, and I only use that. Because they've met the relationship criteria that you've set, not the one they've set.
Brilliant. So it turns out Robert Craven was right. This has been an excellent conversation.
He's a very fine man, to be fair. He's right about a lot of things.
Excellent. Cool. And you are right about a lot of things also. Barnaby, thank you so much for your time today, man. I have thoroughly enjoyed this.
And me too, Mark. I really enjoyed it. Great start to the week.
Yeah, and we agree, and it's just challenging for me, because I have to say things I don't quite agree with to make it a challenging, interesting conversation, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this. There's a movement happening here, man. Maybe we'll get them all to understand in the end, and we'll live in a better world.
I think so. Yeah, I think. Well, listen. Actually, the better world is you always feel like you're moving. It's the bad world is where you feel static, and that's a bad world. Whereas movement, actually, as long as you're moving, I think you're alive. So it's all cool.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, man. We might have to do another one of these in the future. We've done an hour and 39 minutes. So this is the longest I've ever done. So if quantity is any measure, then this must be interesting. Okay, so let's draw a line, man. Thank you so much for your time. I will catch up with you again soon.
Yeah, look forward to that. Thanks ever so much, Martin.